Hello, and welcome to another episode of Belongs to the Shadows. I'm your creepy host, Jamie Bennett. This is podcast episode number 7. And as always, listener discretion is strongly advised. Please like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. On this episode, I'm going to be talking about the very first witch. Yes, you heard me correctly. The very first witch. Who they think is the very first witch. And I'm also going to be talking about the very first witch that was recorded into the Bible. I'm not going to get into religious text very much, but one of the very first recorded witches happens to be recorded in the Bible. So I will be talking about that as well. So here we go. I'm going to start off with Hecate because, if you've watched The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and you've watched pretty much any witch show, this name has come up several times. And when you do a Google search, which is what I always do for these shows, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due, of course, and link it below, but I always research on Google and some other sites for this particular show. And like I always say, I use this word every single time I do a podcast. I like to be organic. I do not like to read the material ahead of time. So I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of things. Fair warning. Fair warning. We know this about me. If you are not new to this channel, we know I mispronounce things all the time. I am educated, believe it or not. I do have a degree in mass communications. I used to be a radio DJ. I used to be an on-air personality. I've been told quite a few times throughout my life that I do have a radio voice. And so there's that. But anywho, we're going to be talking about Hecate, and of course, this comes from Google. I'm going to be going into a link of the Medium website, so it's medium.com, and it's Get to Know the First Witch, an Unforgettable Story. Let me see who posted this, who wrote the story. Okay, so hopefully I don't mispronounce this talented author's name. Bella Hadish posted this on March 16th of 2023, and I will link it below if you guys want to read this story for yourself. But it's titled Get to Know the First Witch, in parentheses, an Unforgettable Story. And I have not read ahead on this at all. The only thing that I have seen was the title of the link. So I'm going to be reading this for the first time as you all are listening. And of course, this comes from Balanish Hadush. Hopefully I did not mispronounce her name. I apologize if I did. Have you ever heard the story about the first witch? So that's what she starts off with. Of course, it is going to be a captivating tale of intrigue, mystery, and power. So this is unraveling the history of this captivating figure and learning more about the origins of witchcraft and its influence on society. So in this article, we are going to explore her life story from her early celebrations to her original use of spells and charms. Discover how she was able to acquire her knowledge and discover how it affected others' beliefs in witchcraft. So we are going to learn why she is known as the first witch and the side effects that this knowledge has had on people throughout the ages. Let's get to know her a little bit better and unlock the secrets and that would otherwise remain locked away. It promises to be an unforgettable journey. So here's the origins of witchcraft. Witchcraft throughout history has been thought to have originated in ancient pagan cultures of Europe. People in these cultures had a deep reverence for the power and mystery of nature, and they attributed supernatural powers to certain elements such as herbs and stones. I love stones. I love stones, and I love learning about different herbs, so I'm drawn to that. People used rituals involving chanting, dancing, mask wearing, and animal sacrifice to harness supernatural powers. Animal sacrifice, not so much. I love animals. I couldn't even hunt. Like, the most that I could do is fish. That's all I've ever done is fish. These pagan practices were eventually blended with Christianity when it became the dominant religion in Europe. So therefore, witchcraft then evolved into a more organized system with specific covens devoted to the practice. As these covens grew larger and larger, so did the fear and suspicion from people unfamiliar with the practice, leading to witch hunts throughout Europe in the Middle Ages. So the most famous witch hunt was that of Agnes Waterhouse, or the first witch, as she had become to be known. Her story is an unforgettable one. Her trial was one of the first witchcraft trials that took place in England in the year 1566. Her browsiness made her become one of the most famous women accused of witchcraft during those times, making her a symbol of strength for generations to come. So, what's the social impact of witchcraft in the early days, you might ask? So, from the dawn of the Middle Ages, stories of witchcraft were plentiful. Rumors and tales spread throughout Europe, which had a great impact on society during this time period. People began to see witches as evil creatures with the power to cast spells, use dark magic, and cause harm to others. This fear and superstition resulted in persecution as well as death. Many innocent people suffered greatly at the hands of those who believed in witches and sorcery. The social impact wasn't only felt by those deemed as witches. However, celebrations such as Walpurgis Night, the night where witches were said to gather on a mountain in Germany, were very, very common during this time era, with people gathering around bonfires, telling stories about witches, and partaking in the rituals for protection against them. So, such practices only contributed to the fear most people had about witchcraft during this time period, but it also gave birth to some of the rituals still performed today by modern day practitioners who celebrate the first witch, a powerful figure that is said to have created all witchcraft. Whew. There's a lot to unpack here. Celebrations arising from early witchcraft beliefs. So, long before Halloween, as well as broomsticks, witchcraft was globally practiced with varying beliefs and celebrations. In Europe, the Celts held Samhain, or Summer's End, on October 31st. This marked the end of their harvest season, where they believed the border between the real world and the spirit world would blur. They would light bonfires and offer sacrifices to appease the gods, while villagers, too, would dress up in costumes to ensure their disguise from any unfriendly spirits. There's quite a few books that I have read about this, and they also kind of, when they talk about the fairyland, of Tir na Nog, they kind of incorporate this as well. I've read quite a few books that incorporate this very thing, where the veil between the, between the fairies and us is weakened. So fairy tales use this as well. But yeah. So in Africa, in West Africa to be precise, followers of Vodun, known elsewhere as voodoo, believed that certain individuals had been given special powers by their gods. Traditionally, these people, known as medicine men or witch doctors, used charms and rituals to heal illnesses, protect crops from evil forces, or cast curses on enemies. Whew. Yeah, there's a lot here. This person did a really good job with this article. An amazing, amazing job. And like I said, I'm going to link it below because I need to give credit where credit is due. So, yeah, there's that. So, in ancient Rome, historians believe that much of their current understanding of witchcraft comes from ancient Rome's belief in magic arts, such as astrology, alchemy, and other forms of divination, which were punishable by death at that time. Witchcraft has been around for centuries, and it is rooted in many cultures around the world, from Europe to Africa and beyond. So, what's history's most notable witches, you might ask? History's most notable witches have been immortalized in story and song, like I said, providing plenty of inspiration for anyone looking to celebrate all things witchy. But who were some of these famous characters, you might ask? The very first witch. The very first witch we know of was the ancient Greek goddess Hecate, which I had mentioned earlier. She was the patron goddess of magic and witchcraft and was often depicted as a three-faced woman carrying a torch or a pair of serpents. So, I'll get into that later. I may not get into that during this episode. I might briefly go over it, but you have Mother Maiden Crone, and that's the three faces of Hecate. And I will explain that later. But let's put a pin in it for now and move on. Societal perception. Though Hecate is seen as a powerful figure today, during her time, witches were viewed with fear and suspicion. As the practice of witchcraft spread across Europe, so did the popular mythology about what witches could or could not do. One such legend stands out, and that is witches had the power to raise storms and blight crops, leading to a widespread witch hunt in many parts of Europe throughout the Middle Ages. Celebrations. Today, Hecate and other famous witches are honored with celebrations around Samhain, the witching hour when many believe the veil between the worlds is thin, making it easier for those with magical powers to contact their ancestors and receive knowledge from beyond. So here's the debunking common myths about witches and witchcraft. Since the dawn of history, witches have been shrouded in mystery and common myths. To get to know the real story behind witchcraft, it's time to debunk some of these myths. Witches worship Satan. And if you've ever watched, not sponsored by, although that would be awesome, because I love the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. If you've ever watched that show, yeah, the correlation between witches and worshiping Satan is very heavy in that show. So, this is one of the most common misconceptions about witches worshiping Satan. Witchcraft is about all hexes, It's all about hexes. Contrary to popular belief, hexes are a small part of the craft known as witchcraft. While some witches focus on hex casting, many others believe in drawing on energy from other sources, such as crystals or elements that exist in nature for healing or divination purposes. Another misconception is all witches are female. That is not true. Witchcraft is not exclusive to females or women. Men can also be practitioners of witchcraft. I know quite a few gentlemen who are. Just throwing that out there. While many well-known witches were female, male witches have existed since ancient times and continue to practice today. In future episodes, I will dive into Druids, the Druid belief system, because it kind of goes hand in hand with this. So we're going to put a pin in that. Keep that in mind. That will be a future episode. While these common misunderstandings out of the way, now you can learn with these common misunderstandings out of the way. Let me rewind. Now you can learn more about the real story behind witchcraft. So let me tell you something. And I may get judgment for this. I had a great aunt named Mabel who was into making medicines from herbs. She was a witch. And she was a witch that grew up in the Ozarks. So future episode will be talking about the witches of Ozarks as well, if you're interested in that. But I remember being a little girl and collecting bugs with my Aunt Mabel. She is said to have had a shed that she kept her herbs drying in, and she created tinctures in the shed, and she had recipe books. And unfortunately, the shed burnt down. No telling how. After she passed away, the shed burnt down. So there went all of her recipes for medicines and stuff. People, even nowadays, get judged very harshly for believing in witchcraft, for titling themselves as Wiccan or, a practitioner. I don't see anything wrong with it, honestly. As long as you're not hurting other living beings and you're not hurting yourself, what does it matter? Honestly, what does it matter? I'm not going to judge people. I believe in Mother Nature. So I title myself, I don't like giving myself a title, but I title myself a Christian witch. So, there's that. I've always been intrigued by the stories of witches and witchcraft and all that, because it's just fascinating. I love learning about history, and I love learning about haunted history. And of course, you can't learn about haunted history or have a show like this without diving into the Salem witch trials, which I had talked about that on one of my television episodes of Belongs to the Shadows in the past. I wanted to do a podcast because I wanted to focus more on the storytelling aspect of these stories, like learning about ancient history and learning about haunted history. I wanted to focus more so on the vocal aspect and the storytelling aspect of my research, rather than posting pictures and videos and you actually seeing me on the screen, because a lot of times people get distracted by that and they lose focus and they're not actually hearing what you're saying. And I love doing this show so much that I think it's important to hear what I'm saying rather than be distracted by me being on the screen or by a whole bunch of video clips and stuff being on the screen. That's why I'm trying to keep it simple and why I'm trying to only post a few pictures. I generally like to keep the same picture up throughout the whole podcast. I know some people might think that that's boring, but there's a reason behind that. Just thought I would throw that out there. I'm going to take a drink of my soda pop. Soda, pop, whatever you want to call it. We call it Coca-Cola. Sippy sippy. Little ASMR for you all. So, let's continue on. So, in particular, witches are often revered as embodiments of personal strength, autonomy, representing a history of resilience within the cultures worldwide. The story of Circe, better known as the First Witch, is an inspiring reminder of this potential power. While Circe may have been remembered for her ability to manipulate people or events through her supernatural powers, she was also known for her courage in standing up for her beliefs, an attribute that remains valued today. Isn't that crazy? Like, people were called witches for standing up for their beliefs, for not staying quiet, for inserting dominance over these beliefs. I think that's really, really sad that, females would get persecuted for having any kind of power back during that time era. It's just really sad. It's really sad, but it is an important part of our history. Like, really, really important part of our history. There are so many books written about witches and the witch trials and the first witches. You could probably find over 100 of them on Amazon alone. So if you're interested in this, just, go to your local library and dive into the history of witches. I'm sure the library has like numerous books where you can do research on this. It's pretty easy to do research, especially like now that we have the internet. The internet is a magical thing. So there's that. So this episode might actually be longer than all the other episodes because there is so much to unpack here. There's a lot of history here. So today we can honor the power of witchcraft by these following things: acknowledging its ancient roots in our culture, which is very important. Like I said, history is important, and it's a very important part of our history. Appreciating how it can empower individuals, celebrating its many forms around the world, embracing it as a symbol of freedom and strength, learning from its historical lessons and stories. So, if you have listened to some of my other episodes, I did talk about Marie Laveau in New Orleans. She's the voodoo queen, and that's witchcraft. And then I talked about Clinda Laveau, who is the modern day voodoo queen, or said to be the modern day voodoo queen in New Orleans. So there is witchcraft all around the world. You have forms of witchcraft in Haiti, you have forms of witchcraft in Africa, you have forms of witchcraft in the United States. It's all around the world. Ireland, everywhere. So in conclusion, it's incredible to think that so much of our history is based on a single witch. Think about that for a moment. A single witch. The first witch. She's the one who started all of this. the first one to tap into the power of witchcraft and shape our understanding of the magical world. But she's also a cautionary tale. She is a reminder of the power of fear and superstition and the difficulties and risks of embracing something so powerful and so mysterious. Witchcraft is widely misunderstood, even today, and it will likely always be clouded in mystery and stigma. But hopefully, with more exploration as well as research, understanding, we can continue to uncover the stories and secrets of our past and get better handle on the supernatural and magical forces out there in the world. We can never forget the first witch and what she has done to shape the world. She did a really good job with this article. Of course, I changed some of the sentences because I don't want to get in trouble for copyright. And I am going to give credit where credit is due. It's very important. So, like I said, I talked about Hecate, and Hecate is a Greek goddess associated with magic, witchcraft, the night, crossroads, and the moon. She is often depicted with torches, a key, or snakes, and sometimes shown with 3 faces or bodies. In ancient Greece, she was honored as a goddess of great power with domains in the sky, earth, and sea. So, the key aspects of Hecate is a prominent figure in witchcraft and is often called upon in magic rituals. Crossroads. She is the guardian of crossroads, symbolizing transition and choices. Night and moon. Hecate is a nocturnal goddess, often associated with the moon and darkness. Underworld. She has ties to the underworld, particularly in her role as a guide for the dead and as a protector of those who have passed. Triple goddess. In later depictions, she is often portrayed as a triple goddess, with 3 bodies or 3 heads. Protector and helper. While associated with magic in the night, Hecate is also seen as a protector and helper, particularly of those who are marginalized or oppressed. So, what's Hecate's role in mythology? Assistance to Demeter. Hecate helped Demeter search for her daughter Persephone, guiding her with torches. Underworld connections. She is associated with Persephone's annual journey to and from the underworld. Hecate's role as the guardian of crossroads is significant, as crossroads were believed to be places where spirits and supernatural events could occur. Roman counterpart. Hecate's Roman equivalent is Trivia, who also shares her association with crossroads. So, in summary, Hecate is a complex, multifaceted goddess with a rich history in Greek mythology. She is a powerful figure associated with magic, witchcraft, and night, as well as crossroads and the underworld, and is often depicted as a triple goddess. So, I told you all that I was going to kind of skim over the triple goddess aspect. Let me explain. I'm going to look it up. You hear me typing. So, the triple goddess is a concept in some pagan and Wiccan traditions, representing the divine feminine energy in 3 aspects: maiden, mother, and crone. These represent the stages of a woman's life and are associated with the waxing, full, and waning moon. Respectively, the symbol embodies the cycle. I can't pronounce this. The cycle nature of life. The cyclical. There we go. Cyclical nature of life, encompassing birth, life, and death. So maiden represents youth, new beginnings, and potential. This phase is associated with the waxing moon, spring, and dawn. Mother represents nurturing, fertility, and creation. This phase is associated with the full moon, summer, and midday. Crone represents wisdom, transformation, and endings. This phase is associated with the waning moon, autumn, winter, and night. So, the triple goddess is often depicted with a triple moon symbol. Let me look up the names of the triple goddess because I told you that there is. You're going to hear me typing again. I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere they have 3 different names. I could be wrong, but I think that they do. Of course, my internet's taking a while. Okay, so Selene is the goddess of the moon. So there is Hecate, Selene, and then I think there's one other. Hecate, Selene, and Hecate, Selene, and Artemis are often associated with each other in modern interpretations, particularly within the neo-paganism and Wicca as part of the triple goddess archetype. So that's what I was trying to explain earlier. I will dive into this a little bit more in a later episode because I will probably talk about Hecate more in that episode. But let's move on and we'll put a pin in that for now. Just saying. Because we want to cover the Witch of Endor. Yeah, I know, this sounds like Star Wars. When I read this, I was thinking Star Wars, Endor. But Witch of Endor, this is the part where I said that one of the first witches came from the Bible. So the Witch of Endor, according to the Hebrew Bible, was consulted by Saul to summon the spirit of the prophet Samuel. So, yeah, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. Saul wished to receive advice on defeating the Philistines in battle after prior attempts to consult God through sacred lots and other means had failed. However, what was summoned, whether the actual ghost of Samuel or a spirit impersonating him, delivered a prophecy of doom against Saul and his army, who were defeated. The events occur in 1 Samuel 28 3-25. It's also mentioned in the Deuterocanonical book of Sirach. Hopefully I pronounced that right. So yeah, there's supposedly the Witch of Endor, and when I typed in the very first recorded witch, this popped up. So when the prophet Samuel dies, he is buried in Ramah. Saul, the king of Israel, seeks advice from God in choosing a course of action against the assembled forces of the Philistine army. He received no answer from his dreams or prophets or the Urim Thummim, having previously driven out all necromancers and magicians from Israel. Saul searches for a witch anonymously. He is told one is living in the village of Endor. Sounds like Star Star Wars. Saul disguises himself and crosses enemy lines to visit her, asking her to raise Samuel. The woman initially refuses because of Saul's royal edict against sorcery, but Saul assures her that she will not be punished. So the woman summons a spirit, and when it appears, she works out who Saul is and screams, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." Saul assures her that no harm will come to her and asks what she sees. She says she sees Elohim rising, plural noun and verb. Then Saul asks what he, singular, looks like, and she describes an old man wrapped in a robe. Saul bows down to the spirit but is unable to see it himself. Wow. The spirit complains of being disturbed, berates Saul for disobeying God, and predicts Saul's downfall. The living Samuel had already said Saul would have his kingship removed. But this spirit adds that Israel's army will be defeated and Saul and his sons will be with me tomorrow. Saul collapses in terror. The woman comforts him and prepares him a meal of a fatted calf to restore his strength. So the following day, the Israelite army is defeated as prophesied. Saul is wounded by the Philistines and commits suicide by falling on his sword. Later, a young Amalekite, hoping to impress David, will falsely claim he delivered the death blow, and David will execute him. In 1 Chronicles, it is stated that Saul's death was in part a punishment for seeking advice from a medium rather than from God. So, this comes from Wikipedia. I'm sorry I mispronounced things. Darn dialect. Anyways, that comes from Wikipedia, and I will link it below. But like I said, I will be talking more about Hecate and the Triple Goddess in future episodes. I will also be talking about witches of the Ozarks, since I mentioned my Aunt Mabel. I respected my Aunt Mabel tremendously. She was a very interesting woman, very, very polite, fun to be around. Of course, I didn't get to know her for very long. I was a little kid when I hung out with her. I was not very old at all. I think I was probably like maybe 4 years old when I hung out with her. And it's amazing that I even remember collecting bugs with her. That's all I remember from that camping trip, because we camped out in her yard, and she lived out in the country. Like, she had wood surrounding her house. Like, I come from a family. My grandma was born in the Ozarks. My grandma came from the Ozarks of Missouri, and I come from the St. Louis, Missouri area. I was born in Redbud, Illinois, and that's like probably about 30 minutes from St. Louis. We used to mushroom hunt. We would hunt for morel mushrooms, and I haven't gotten to do that in such a long time, and it frustrates me. But anyways, I'm a woman of nature. I like being out in nature, and I like mushroom hunting, and I like fishing, and I like camping. I like getting to do all those things. And I haven't gotten to do those things in a very long time. And I would like my daughter and my kids to be able to do those things. But it's just not easy, especially in today's society. Like, it's not necessarily safe to go out camping in a tent, especially since we have black bears here. At least black bears are the friendlier version of bears, but still, I'm saying. Anyhow, I hope you all have enjoyed this episode, and I hope that it has been informational and educational for you all. And until next time, stay creepy.